Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money on the air right now, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Big news day today. Stocks closing mostly lower as investors sold some of the high-flying tech names and went into the small-cap stocks, real estate stocks, and other rate-sensitive sectors of the market, and expectations of a September pivot to lower interest rates by the Federal Reserve after the latest inflation reading came out today. We see the Dow gained 32 points at the close at 39,754. The S&P 500 pulling back 49. The NASDAQ dropping 364 points. Both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ snapping an impressive winning streak, which took both of those averages off of record highs. The Russell 2K small cap index indicated outperforming, gaining about 3.6%. It was the Russell 2K's biggest one-day outperformance of the NASDAQ on record. Small cap stocks surging as favorable inflation report today stirred hopes that the relief could soon be on the way in the form of a interest rate cut. We did see a big sell-off in large tech names. That could mean the biggest one-day market cap erasure for the Magnificent Seven in nearly 2 years. We'll take a closer look at that coming up here shortly. Expectations for interest rate cuts by the Fed giving a big boost to the bond market, though. We did see a big reaction there with Treasury yields closing at their lowest levels in more than 3 months. The yield in the 10-year note, that's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, is back down to 4.19%. That's the lowest we've seen since the end of March. We'll be taking a closer look at the inflation reading out today and the whole works in just a moment. On crime in Los Angeles today, I'll be joined later this hour by veteran prosecutor Nathan Hochman, who's running to become the next Los Angeles County District Attorney to replace the soft-on-crime incumbent George Gascon. Nathan Hochman will be joining me live later this hour. What's being called by the White House, President Biden's Big Boy News Conference, is set to begin this hour. After a few delays this afternoon, Biden's first news conference in months. He'll be holding this news conference at the NATO summit after an embarrassing gaffe earlier today when he introduced the president of Ukraine at the NATO summit as President Putin of Russia. There was applause and gasps, and then he corrected himself to say President Zelensky. I'll discuss the news conference, if indeed it happens, as scheduled now this hour, and the drama going on in the Democratic Party with new calls today for President Biden to end his re-election campaign following the recent debate to performance against former President Trump recently. I'll discuss that with veteran public relations guru Michael Levine coming up later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets and the economy, that new inflation reading and the whole works. Let's mix in politics, too. Joining us live now, Jonathan Hoenig, Fox Business contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and the author of the book Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. Jonathan Hoenig, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Frank, it's great to be with you, and there's so much to watch and so much to talk about, and certainly many eyes are going to be on the president's news conference tonight, but also so many eyes on Wall Street, and really saw a changing of the guard today. You know, for so long, it's been those big dominant tech stocks. They've gone up and left everything else in the dust. Today was a complete reversal of that. You saw the equal-weighted S&P 500, one that is, not market cap dominated, up about 1.5%. The market cap weighted, the large caps down about 0.5%. So today was almost like the opposite of everything we've seen over the last number of months.
All right, let's talk about that inflation report we got today, since people are still impacted by inflation in a big way. In the last couple of years, it's been described as a better-than-expected report. Consumer prices slipping just 0.1% from May to June after having remained flat the previous month. According to the Labor Department, they say it was the first monthly decline in overall inflation since May of 2020, when the economy was paralyzed by the pandemic, and measured from 1 year earlier, prices were up 3% in June, cooler than the 3.3% annual rate we saw in the month of May. So what's your reaction to this latest inflation reading, and will this move the needle as far as the Fed plans on the rates are concerned?
Well, Frank, I'm all about price and, keeping an eye on big picture market trends. And the irony, on the same day as you said that inflation reading came back, you saw the price of so many gold stocks hit new 52-week highs. GDX is the ETF. It's the exchange traded fund that tracks the big gold stocks like Newmont Mining, NEM, Anglo American Mines, AEM. They're at 52-week highs just this week, today. So I'm really trying to keep my eye on price. And my sense is that inflation, maybe the CPI is down, maybe the official numbers are down, but I think there's a lot of indications that prices are set to rise, and precious metals are probably the best indication that I have.
Very good point. We saw the price of gold today blowing past $2,400 on this latest inflation reading. That's a curious reaction, isn't it? When you see normally gold going up when the inflation reading is hotter.
Yeah, indeed. And think about the difference, Frank. I mean, most people have some exposure to those Magnificent Seven stocks, if not through individually, certainly through their 401ks, the S&P 500 index funds. Gold is still such a tiny, minute part of most people's portfolios, yet it's up there near those all-time highs. And, prices' primary trends tend to persist. So you've got both the NASDAQ and gold at all-time highs. The difference is gold is very under-owned relative to NASDAQ and AI, which isn't just, in my opinion, over-owned. It's on everyone's lists and been in every newspaper magazine for the last 6 months.
All right, and silver has certainly had a big run this year, and right now trading just below $32 an ounce, $31.64. We haven't focused that much on silver, but it's made an impressive move so far this year. In fact, year to date, up more than 32% here at last check, up more than $7. Right now at $31.64 here. What about silver?
I think it goes higher as well, Frank. One of the stocks hitting a new 52-week high today was Pan American Silver. That's PAAS. And, we look at a stock at a 52-week high, we think, ooh, I can't buy that. It's too high. But stocks at 52-week highs tend to continue to make new 52-week highs. They're undergoing a bull trend. So I do think SLV, that's the ticker that tracks the silver ETF. You can own that right now. And it's under that idea, Frank, that a rising tide tends to lift all boats. So GLD, SLV, and I'll throw one else in that I own over at capitalspig.com, and that's Platinum, PPLT. I think they're all going to benefit. And the fact, Frank, that they're rising in the face of supposedly headline inflation decreasing, I think is even more fuel for the bull's case.
We're testing all of your metal here today. Jonathan Hoenig, thanks for mentioning Platinum, which was up today a couple dollars at $1,016.50. We haven't quoted Platinum lately, but it too has made a move on the upside this year. Let's take a look here. It's up, about $18 so far this year total. So there was a time when Platinum used to be more expensive than gold, and right now it's less than half the price of gold. So that's very interesting here. As we continue to track the metals here, we're on the air live with Jonathan Hoenig from Fox Business, big contributor there. And we're always very grateful for your contributions here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. As you mentioned, the highly anticipated news conference, President Biden's first news conference in months, what the White House itself has called the Big Boy news conference, has not happened yet. It was supposed to have happened at 3:30 this afternoon. It's now almost a quarter after 4 o'clock, and be interesting to see how this plays out. But a lot of conversations here about how the market has been reacting lately and the kind of moves we've seen. A lot of conversations about how the markets are a forward-looking mechanism, and certainly following Biden's performance in the debate with President Trump. We've seen the market rally here. What's your assessment of what's happening on the political front and the impact here on the markets?
Well, I would never bet against this country, Frank, regardless of who's president. Still the most individualistic and opportunistic and magnificent country in the history of mankind. So these are troubled times, no doubt. But keep in mind, the market did very well, I remember, under the latter half of President Clinton's term, where there was a lot of turmoil and uncertainty. So don't let your politics influence how you invest. You really need to keep an eye on price. What I'm seeing is a changing of the guard. You saw Philip Morris today at a new 52-week high. That's a tobacco stock. Could you think of something more out of favor? So I like Philip Morris. I also like British American Tobacco, that's BTI, the stock near its 52-week high that has a 7% dividend. So things that have been out of favor, Frank, I think now's the time to pounce. Things like small cap stocks, which, as you said, had huge outperformance today for the first time in quite some time. And even one that's kind of ripped from the headlines is Israel. Emerging markets have really been left behind in the face of all this Magnificent Seven outperformance. So I think you can bet on Israeli stocks long term. EIS is the one to watch in that space. Do all your own due diligence, but more than anything, don't buy the dips, Frank, as these big tech stocks go down. Where most people really lose their shirts is that they buy it at 50, 40, 30, 20. They buy all the way down. So as Paul Tudor Jones once said, losers to average losers don't buy dips.
On there live with Jonathan Honig, investment expert. And what about with the upheaval in the Middle East continuing and the Hurricane Beryl shutting down oil production in the Gulf of Mexico? Certainly the oil names have been back in focus. We see oil today moving higher by 52 cents at 82.62 in New York. It's above $85 in London, up 32 cents to 85.40 a barrel there. What do you see ahead in the oil patch?
I think oil and precious metals are the place to be, I should say, energy in the commodity space right now. And there's a couple ways to play it. One is this basket of master limited partnerships, MLPs. The ticker is AMLP. And as I said, it owns this whole big diversified basket of infrastructure companies that deal in energy. It's got about a 7.5% yield, very strong on the charts. And also, Frank, I think you could just buy the old XLE. That's the ETF that holds the big energy companies, Exxon, Chevron, etc., ConocoPhillips. This is the big mega cap oil companies. It's not as flashy or sexy, perhaps, as AI, but strong on the charts, and I think one you can certainly make money in the next 3 to 5 years.
All right, you remember when the day the Nasdaq died back, what was it, 1999, I guess, right? And today we saw a pretty significant pullback for the Nasdaq. Don't normally see this kind of a move on the downside for the tech names, as you mentioned at the beginning. Nvidia leading the way lower today after leading the market higher for nearly the past year now. Nvidia down 751 at 127 and change. Apple, which has been on a tear, down more than $5 today at 227 and change. Let's talk more about these Magnificent Seven names and what about Nvidia at this point?
Well, I mean, these are the names that have dominated for years now. And Frank, to the point now that, they remind me very much of those technology stocks in the latter half of the 1990s, not even necessarily because of their valuation, but just their exposure. AI isn't something new now. It's not something that's unusual. And, I think it's what reminds me very much, as I said, the late 1990s. The thought back then was Cisco is a sure thing because Cisco is the internet and the internet is the future. Well, the internet was the future, but Cisco's valuation contracted, and that's what worries me about so many of these AI plays. I think even if the companies do make money and the technology does pan out, the valuation at which so many of these names are trading is extraordinary, and that's why, Frank, from 2000 to 2010, you basically saw all the major indices like the NASDAQ and the S&P basically trade flat. So I like names like EES right now. That's Elephant Sam. That's an index of small capitalization stocks. These are the ones that have really been the underperformers, the small stocks, not the big stocks. I think they could do well even if the NASDAQ and the S&P do not.
All right. And we've noted on this program from many of our experts here that certainly in the past, cryptos seem to be correlating the move with the NASDAQ, and that has broken recently as the NASDAQ was on a record-shattering tear. Bitcoin actually pulled back and right now is back down to around 57,000 here as we speak. We talked to the biggest fans of crypto here as well as the harshest critics, those with the laser eyes on and those without. What are your thoughts on what's happening in the crypto space here at the moment with the Bitcoin well off its all-time high?
Well, it's down about 10% in the last 6 months, and trends tend to persist. So I think you have to be very careful, Frank. Buying dips. You never know if something going down as a dip or the beginning of a long-term revaluation. But you'd always rather buy it on the way up, not on the way down. So, I think there's much better places to put your money. For me, I'd rather be buying silver or platinum, which are strong right now, than crypto, which is weak. The old saying is that bull markets are built on doubt, bear markets are built on hope. I know a lot of people are hoping about crypto. I think a lot of people are pretty doubtful about platinum. You don't see people scrambling to get into platinum futures or the silver ETF. It's not, the most popular thing that everyone's talking about. So that's the doubt, I think, that provides the opportunity. Things like crypto, I think everyone who could buy and would buy has already bought. I don't think the same is with metals, and that's why I think it's my number one buy right now.
All right, talking about blockchain and gold chain and silver chain here live on the air with Jonathan Honig this afternoon. Let's talk about Tesla for a moment. That was a big loser today as well, down more than 8%, by the way, on a report that said Tesla will delay its closely watched robo-taxi debut by 2 months in order to build more prototypes. Tesla's seen quite a bump, had that big run-up recently. What about Tesla here?
I mean, even with that decline, Frank, amazingly, the stock's up 40% in the last month. I mean, it's hard to think of a more colorful CEO, a more transformative company, or a more volatile stock than Tesla. It had been the weakest of the so-called Magnificent Seven up until the last couple of weeks. It recouped its entire year's loss in the matter of, I believe, just 3 trading days. So this is a wildly volatile stock, Frank, but at least right now, it's not a leading stock. And, for me, picking stocks, it's almost like if you were drafting a baseball team, and you had all your friends out there, you would pick the strongest guys and want to be on the team. You wouldn't pick the heaviest and the weakest and the slowest guys. You'd pick the strongest. That's what I feel like when you're allocating money. You want to pick the strongest names, and Tesla, great company, but simply not among the strongest stocks, even among the strongest technology stocks right now, not on my list.
All right. Before I let you off the hook, Jonathan Honig, any other specific places where you're putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, I think you always want to have a little cash in the kitty, Frank. You can't help but be a little concerned given the fact that people's credit card, debt balances now at an all-time high, household balances in terms of debt near all-time highs. But as I said, I like what's been unpopular. So value, small cap, and here's one that, might really do well if the dollar starts to cradle, and that is international real estate. Interestingly, you saw a number of real estate stocks at 52-week highs this week, and VNQI, that's Victor Nancy QI, this is a basket of international real estates. If the dollar finally starts to drop, this will do extraordinarily well. It's near 15-year lows, and I do own it over at capitalistbig.com.
Well, fantastic. As always, Jonathan Honig, we so appreciate you coming to us here live on the air again this afternoon. That is Jonathan Honig, Fox News contributor, Fox Business News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and author of his book, Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Always great to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking the call this afternoon.
Oh, my pleasure, Frank. Be well.
Take care. Still standing by for the President's News Conference. Hasn't happened yet. We'll talk about whatever does happen with the public relations guru extraordinaire here in Southern California. Michael Levine will be joining me live later this hour. And we'll also be talking crime today with veteran prosecutor Nathan Hochman, who's looking to unseat the incumbent L.A. County District Attorney George Gascon. That and more straight ahead, but right now the latest on your ride this afternoon here on 790 KABC.
Love is my religion.
790 KBC welcomes Ziggy Marley coming to the Pacific Amphitheater on July 18th. Tickets are on sale now. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now. Tickets furnished by the Pacific Amphitheater. Mixed finish for the stock market today with the tech stocks pulling back in a big way. The Nasdaq down 364 points, settling at 18,283. The S&P 500 down 49 at 5,585. Both of those averages coming off of all-time highs. The Dow, meanwhile, moving higher at the close of 32 points at 39,754. The market reacting to the latest news on inflation at the consumer level, which came in slightly better than most analysts had expected, but is still running hotter than the Fed's 2% target, still running above 3%. Taking a look at Bitcoin, it's down about $100 now at $57,262. Ethereum down 18 at $3,096, and Doge at 11 cents. The magnificent one, NVIDIA, taking a hit today, down to more than $7 at $127 and change. And Apple down more than $5 at $227.57. Tesla, among the casualties of the day, slipping into reverse, down more than $22 at $241.03. And now the latest news here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC, turning to the big issue of crime right now. Some eye-popping numbers released by the California Department of Justice. Criminal statistics for 2023 recently released, and they show a pretty big increase almost across the board. This is LA County voters are about to make a very important choice in the contest between incumbent soft-on-crime Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon and veteran prosecutor Nathan Hochman. Nathan Hochman's received more endorsements from law enforcement this week and right now is leading in the polls ahead of the November election. Joining us live now, Nathan Hochman. Mr. Hochman, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Frank.
Give us your reaction to that big news we got on the crime statistics and your reaction here, sir.
So it was big news because one of George Gascon's big pitches on why he should be reelected is that his social experiment, his pro-criminal reforms were actually working and crime was going down. That big lie has now been revealed. His gaslighting of the residents of Los Angeles County has now been exhibited because the California Department of Justice shows with violent crime, property crime, auto theft, shoplifting, burglaries, hate crimes, the crimes are either up single digits, double digits, or in some cases even triple digits. Again, revealing the big lie that George Gascon has been telling, that his reforms are actually working.
And those numbers pretty much speak for themselves, don't they? Over the last 3 years, violent crimes in Los Angeles County up big, 12% all overall. Robberies up 16%, property crimes up 20%, and get this, shoplifting up 133%. What's your reaction to those eye-popping numbers here?
Those eye-popping numbers are absolutely consistent with what people are experiencing. That was this sort of disconnect with what George Gascon was telling us. People were experiencing that crime is going up all over the county. We're seeing houses being broken into, cars being broken into, stores being broken into, yet he was telling everyone that everything's getting safer. Now the statistics actually back and support people's actual beliefs and senses. And 2/3 of the people right now, when polled, said they feel less safe today than when George Gascon came into office in 2020.
You're speaking to a big business audience here, and certainly retail crime, a very, very big issue. And it's been heartbreaking to have many of the folks who've been victims of these smash and grabs, including restaurant people, by the way, who increasingly have become victims of these dine and dash situations and wrestling with the homeless and so forth. What is your message to the business community here to address these business-related crimes?
My message is that I will reverse George Gascon's policies that have basically engaged in most extreme pro-criminal set of directives in LADA history. So, for instance, you will not see, if there's a Hochman administration, a policy that says we're not going to prosecute juveniles, people under 18, if they steal just under $950. We're going to go back to doing what the DA has always done, which is hold people accountable for their actions. But we'll do it in a fair, consistent, impartial, reasonable way in order to bring back safety into our community.
On there live with Nathan Hochman, veteran prosecutor seeking to unseat the incumbent district attorney George Gascon. Let me ask you about some other big issues here following the surrounding of a synagogue in the Pico Robertson area, something that hadn't been seen since the 1930s Europe. What's your reaction to what happened there, and how would you handle these hate crimes that we're seeing out there?
So my reaction is that George Gascon has been incredibly silent on the sidelines, further emboldening hate criminals to engage in their actions. First, these folks, these pro-Hamas protesters, shut down the 110 freeway. Did anyone go to jail? No. They shut down LAX. Did people go to jail? No. They shut down UCLA and USC. Did people go to jail when those words turned into illegal conduct? And that's the clear distinction between the First Amendment and criminal conduct. When words become illegal conduct, the DA has to step up and say that we will prosecute people engaged in illegal conduct. So then you had the incident on the Pico Robertson area where people are actually now being violently attacked. And it is the follow-on of George Gascon's silence on the sidelines. I will not be silent. I will say that in our community, whether it's Jewish groups or any other group, they will understand that the DA will be the champion of their rights and making sure criminals understand that the lines are now going to be enforced in our society again.
On the air live with veteran prosecutor Nathan Hochman, who's seeking to unseat the incumbent DA, George Gascon. And on Prop 47, this reform measure, it looks like it will be on the ballot now. And it looks like for the moment in Sacramento, they've throttled back there. The governor and other lawmakers have throttled back on trying to undermine that proposition that's on the ballot. What is your reaction to this latest news on the Prop 47 reform?
So this Prop 47 reform, called the Homeless, Drug Addiction, and Retail Theft Reduction Act, is actually going to give prosecutors some very valuable tools in going after repeat offenders. So in other words, if someone goes ahead and steals just under $950 3 times, on the third time, they can be prosecuted as a felon instead of just a continuous series of misdemeanors. Same thing with drug possession. If they do it 3 times, the third time a court can order treatment. The fourth time, the court can put them in prison. So again, what it's targeting is the repeat offenders. And it does the same thing, by the way, with fentanyl. Fentanyl is going to kill more 18 to 35-year-olds than anything else out there. And this law adopts procedures so that fentanyl dealers, when they're convicted the first time, will be read a warning and said, if you do it again and someone dies, you can be charged with murder, thereby hopefully making sure a first-time fentanyl dealer never becomes a second-time fentanyl dealer and kills someone. So I think this proposition that will be on the November ballot is very sensible, and I'd ask people to certainly consider and vote for it.
On the air live with Nathan Hochman, and I had the honor of moderating one of the debates in which you participated in with all of the candidates. You emerged victorious, and now will be challenging directly George Gascon. And during that discussion we had there, it was pointed out that you are a veteran prosecutor, of course, and have tried many cases, whereas George Gascon has not had that courtroom experience. Tell us more about that.
You know, usually a DA seeking re-election would tell the electorate that, look at all my years of experience compared to my opponent. George Gascon, though, has never personally prosecuted or defended a single criminal case in his entire career. It's absolutely shocking since he's been the DA of San Francisco and L.A. I have 34 years of criminal justice experience, 10 years as a prosecutor doing over 100 cases, 24 years as a defense attorney doing over 200 cases. So I'll take that 34 years over 0 for George Gascon any day of the week.
Veteran prosecutor Nathan Hochman, thank you very much for taking the call. We wish you all the best, and thank you again for joining us live. Look forward to many more conversations live on the air with you here.
I look forward to it as well, Frank. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That is Nathan Hochman, who is running to become the next Los Angeles County District Attorney to replace the incumbent soft-on-crime DA George Gascon. Live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. What's being called by the White House, President Biden's big boy news conference in months, first one in months, is underway. President Biden under intense scrutiny here in the spotlight amid questions over his age and fitness, taking questions from reporters. He's calling out reporters from a list that's apparently been pre-prepared in his first solo news conference in months. This after earlier today, he mistakenly introduced Ukraine's president as Vladimir Putin at a NATO event in Washington. And just a few moments ago, he referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Following all this closely is veteran public relations guru Michael Levine. Michael Levine, thank you very much for taking the call. Give us your first impressions of what we've seen here today.
Well, first of all, I think he has been injected with some adrenaline, not unlike he was before the State of the Union address. His energy level looked significantly better than that debate. But he's under intense scrutiny. People cannot forget what they saw during that debate. It's haunting people, and it has created quite a difficulty for President Biden. Now, he did look a bit better today. He sounded a bit better today, but he made at least two gaffes. The first was identifying Zelensky as Putin. And when that happened in the room, you could hear the audible gasps. So it shows you the level of scrutiny and intention. But he did sound certainly better. Now, better than what? Better than a person who you wouldn't hire to work at a greeter at Walmart? Sure, he did sound better and he did look better. But he still made a couple of gaffes that are, more serious than I think would normally be expected for the President of the United States.
It looks like he worked off a teleprompter at the beginning of this news conference there to wrap up this NATO summit, and then calling out reporters by name from a list. One radio reporter was recently fired for apparently admitting that she received questions from the White House in advance, or they provided the questions, or she provided whatever questions they were able to get in advance. So what do you think's going on here today?
Frank, I just don't believe in my heart that this performance today, albeit improved from the debate, slightly improved, is fundamentally going to change anything. The conversation has begun. It seems unable to be stopped. 70% or more of Americans, including Democrats, including independents, believe that President Joe Biden, is too old, too incapacitated to be up for the job of President of the United States. And the debate performance was so devastating in terms of imagery, optics, and so I think it's going to be so lasting in the minds of people that it's going to be very hard for me to see how he ever recovers from that. And
certainly the gaffe introducing Zelensky as Putin, that's going to...
Didn't help.
You can forget that.
It didn't help, brother.
No. It didn't, and it kind of reminded me, remember, we've been doing this for a long time. Remember during the 1980 Democratic Convention when President Carter was going to introduce Hubert Humphrey and announced Hubert Horatio Hornblower Humphrey. Remember that?
Yes, but no one would have ever accused Jimmy Carter, for all his failings, of being as senile or apparently senile. And look, the suspicions also follow his inability, his unwillingness to take a neurological exam, a Parkinson's doctor coming to the White House 9 times in a year. Now, Frank, how many times has a Parkinson's doctor come to your house in the last year? How many have they come to my house in the last year? The answer is 0. Now, why? There's just too much here to think that you can just talk your way out of it. It's I'm afraid it's untenable.
Yeah, on the air live with PR guru Michael Levine, one of the biggest names in Hollywood. That you've handled some of the biggest stars in Hollywood, and we saw that op-ed by George Clooney, who recently hosted a Biden fundraiser here and has reversed course. Other big names, by the way, have also changed their minds about President Biden's fitness. So what's your reaction to Hollywood's reaction we've seen lately?
Well, when you talk about George Clooney, when you talk about many of the people who have come out in opposition to Biden's ability to stay on the ticket, you're talking about friends of his, people who have raised money for him, people who have been to his house, people who have socialized with him. And for them to come out, for George Clooney and many others, it's not one or two. You know, if it were one or two, you could make some case. It's I think we're up to maybe a dozen congressmen, men and women. We're up to
Democrats,
a couple of senators. I mean, this is it's very, very hard to see this being done in a way that somehow it's all forgotten in a week or two.
and then the mainstream media is certainly under a lot of scrutiny too about President Biden's condition, why it wasn't reported more aggressively or properly.
Well,
really,
it's
what's your reaction to that part?
You know, Frank, that is so important. The media, the mainstream media, and by that I mean most media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, NPR radio, it is absolutely contemptible in the extreme that all of these media outlets, with thousands of staffers, didn't report this, and most Americans believe knowingly didn't report it.
Michael Levine, thank you very much for taking the call on this big news day here today. That is veteran public relations expert Michael Levine joining us live here. Coming up next, the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. This is Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
The Rolling Stone Music Now podcast gets inside the biggest stories with Rolling Stone senior writer Brian Hyatt, Snoop Dogg, and Lotto.
Let me give you one of my secrets. I remain the biggest kid in the room at all times. As a kid, and you can't believe that. Look at where you at. Keep making it about fun.
Yeah, we blessed to be able to do a job that's like fun.
There's two funds that's the most important funds in the world. Funds that you make off of the fun that you have.
Rolling Stone Music Now, wherever you listen.